7. Edward 1901–1910. King Edward VII, who reigned from 1901 to 1910, is often referred to as the Peacemaker King. Born Albert Edward, he was the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert and the heir to the British throne for most of his life. When he finally ascended to the throne in 1901 after the death of his mother, Queen Victoria, he brought a breath of fresh air to the British monarchy. Edward VII's reign marked a significant departure from the long and solemn Victorian era. Known for his gregarious personality and love for socializing, King Edward VII was a stark contrast to his reserved and stoic mother, Queen Victoria. His reign was characterized by a more relaxed and modern approach to monarchy. He was a popular figure who actively engaged in diplomacy, reshaped British society, and left a lasting impact on the early 20th century. To understand the significance of King Edward VII's reign, it's crucial to examine the context in which he came to power. The late 19th century had been dominated by the Victorian era, characterized by Queen Victoria's lengthy reign, 1837 to 1901. This period was marked by strict moral values, industrialization, British imperial expansion, and a certain degree of social conservatism. However, as the 20th century dawned, a new era was emerging. The Victorian era was giving way to the Edwardian era, named after King Edward VII. This transition was not only about a change in leadership but also a shift in societal norms and values. The Edwardian era brought with it a more relaxed attitude towards social conventions, greater political reforms, and a cultural shift towards modernity. King Edward VII's reign was a pivotal moment in British history that had a profound impact on the early 20th century. Several factors contribute to the importance of his reign. Diplomacy and international relations. Edward VII played a significant role in international diplomacy, particularly in strengthening alliances with France and Russia. His efforts laid the groundwork for the Entente Cordiale with France, which would prove crucial in the lead-up to World War I. Socioeconomic and cultural change. The Edwardian era witnessed significant socioeconomic and cultural changes. Industrialization and technological advancements continued to reshape society, and the emergence of the middle class began to transform British culture. Edwardian Britain was marked by a burgeoning arts and literary scene, as well as shifts in fashion and lifestyle. Political reforms. King Edward VII's reign saw important political reforms, including efforts to address the Irish question and labor and suffrage issues. While not all issues were resolved during his reign, his approach set the stage for later developments. The monarch's role. Edward VII's approach to monarchy, characterized by a more accessible and sociable demeanor, influenced the way the British monarchy engaged with the public and adapted to changing societal expectations. This approach would be further developed by his successors. King Edward VII, born Albert Edward on November 9, 1841, was the eldest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. His early life was spent in the grandeur of the British royal family, but it was also marked by a strict upbringing under the influence of his parents. His education was rigorous, focusing on subjects like history, politics, and military matters. As the heir to the throne, there were high expectations for him. Edward's early life was not without its challenges. He often found himself at odds with his parents, particularly his father, Prince Albert, who had a controlling influence over the household. This strained relationship would have a lasting impact on Edward's personality and approach to his own role as king. Edward's path to the throne was a long and impatiently awaited one. He held the record for being the longest-serving heir apparent in British history, spending over 59 years in this position. This lengthy period of waiting was largely due to Queen Victoria's lengthy reign, which spanned 63 years. It was only after the death of Queen Victoria in 1901 that Edward finally ascended to the throne at the age of 59. His reign marked a significant departure from the solemn and conservative Victorian era, as he brought a more open and approachable style of monarchy. Edward's relationship with his mother, Queen Victoria, was complex. While he often clashed with her during his youth due to her domineering nature and strict control over his life, their relationship improved over time. As he matured, he took on more royal duties and responsibilities, which helped bridge the gap between them. Queen Victoria came to rely on her son for advice on political and international matters. In terms of his relationship with his son, George V, it was generally more distant and formal compared to the close relationship he had hoped for. This was partly due to the influence of his own upbringing, which had been marked by formality and a certain emotional distance. However, King George V respected his father's legacy and continued many of the diplomatic and modernizing efforts that Edward had initiated during his reign. King Edward VII's reign witnessed significant industrial and technological advancements that continued to shape British society. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were marked by innovations in transportation, communication, and industry. The advent of the automobile, the expansion of the railway system, and the development of the telegraph and telephone networks transformed how people and goods moved, and information was disseminated. These innovations not only made life more convenient but also contributed to economic growth and urbanization. The Edwardian era saw the continued rise of the middle class, a social group that was increasingly influential in shaping British society. The expansion of education and improved economic opportunities allowed many individuals to move up the social ladder. The middle class began to play a more prominent role in politics, culture, and society. This socio-economic shift had profound implications for the distribution of wealth and political power. It also contributed to changing attitudes toward class and status, as the middle class sought to establish its identity and assert its values. The Edwardian era was a period of continued British imperialism and global influence. Britain's empire was at its zenith, and King Edward VII played a diplomatic role in maintaining and expanding British interests abroad. His efforts to strengthen alliances with France and Russia, as well as his involvement in international diplomacy, helped maintain Britain's position as a global superpower. King Edward VII's reign was marked by his active involvement in international diplomacy, where he played a significant role in shaping the diplomatic landscape of the early 20th century. His personal charm, extensive network of relationships, and diplomatic skills made him an effective diplomat and mediator. Edward saw diplomacy as a way to safeguard British interests and maintain peace in Europe. He believed in the importance of alliances and sought to build and strengthen them to ensure the security of the British Empire. One of the most significant diplomatic achievements of King Edward VII's reign was the Entente Cordiale, a series of agreements reached between Britain and France in 1904. This marked a major shift in British foreign policy, as it moved away from its traditional policy of splendid isolation and sought to establish closer ties with France. The Entente Cordiale resolved long-standing disputes between the two nations, particularly in Africa and Asia, and set the stage for a cooperative relationship. While it was not a formal military alliance, it represented a significant diplomatic breakthrough and laid the groundwork for future cooperation during World War I. Another key diplomatic event during King Edward VII's reign was the Russo-Japanese War of 1904–1905. This conflict between Russia and Japan had far-reaching implications for global politics. Edward played a crucial role in mediating the conflict, and he hosted the Portsmouth Conference in 1905, which led to the Treaty of Portsmouth. This diplomatic effort earned him recognition as a peacemaker and enhanced Britain's reputation as a mediator in international conflicts. The war's impact on global politics was significant. It demonstrated the rise of Japan as a major world power and highlighted the decline of Russia as an imperial force. It also had implications for the balance of power in East Asia and influenced later developments in the region, including the outbreak of World War I. In addition to the Entente Cordiale and his role in mediating the Russo-Japanese War, King Edward VII was actively engaged in diplomatic efforts across Europe. He aimed to maintain stability on the continent and protect British interests. His diplomatic endeavors included visits to various European capitals, where he cultivated personal relationships with European monarchs and heads of state. These relationships allowed him to act as a bridge between different nations and promote peaceful resolutions to conflicts. One notable example of his diplomatic efforts in Europe was his involvement in the Moroccan crisis of 1905 and 1911. In both instances, Edward worked to diffuse tensions between European powers and prevent the escalation of conflict. King Edward VII's reign, from 1901 to 1910, was marked by a dynamic political landscape in Britain. It was a period of transition and change in British politics, characterized by shifting power dynamics, evolving party structures, and significant reforms. The Education Act of 1902. This act, initiated under Balfour's government, aimed to improve education in England and Wales. It created local education authorities, increased funding for schools, and promoted secular education. The Trade Disputes Act of 1906. Under Campbell Bannerman's government, this legislation gave legal protection to trade unions, allowing them to engage in collective bargaining without fear of being sued for damages. The Licensing Act of 1908. This act, introduced by Campbell Bannerman's government, aimed to reduce alcohol consumption by restricting pub opening hours and increasing taxes on alcohol. The People's Budget of 1909. Proposed by Chancellor of the Exchequer David Lloyd George and supported by Asquith, this budget introduced higher taxes on the wealthy to fund social welfare programs. It was met with opposition from the House of Lords, leading to a constitutional crisis known as the Lords versus Commons struggle. During Edward VII's reign, the monarchy had largely evolved into a constitutional institution with limited political power. The king's role was ceremonial, and he had to act on the advice of his ministers. However, King Edward VII, with his diplomatic skills and connections, played a subtle behind-the-scenes role in international relations and diplomacy. His ability to build personal relationships with European leaders, as mentioned earlier, had a positive impact on British foreign policy. Edward's approachable and sociable demeanor also helped to humanize the monarchy and maintain its popularity. While he did not directly influence domestic politics, his presence and image were important in maintaining public support for the monarchy during a period of political change. The Irish question was one of the most contentious and long-standing issues in British politics during the Edwardian era. It revolved around the demand for Irish Home Rule, which aimed to grant Ireland a degree of self-governance within the United Kingdom. The Irish Home Rule movement, led primarily by the Irish Parliamentary Party and its leader, Charles Stewart Parnell, sought to address the political and economic grievances of Ireland's Catholic majority. The issue of Home Rule stirred deep divisions, both within Ireland and between Ireland and Britain. Unionists in Ireland, primarily the Protestant population concentrated in the northern counties of Ulster, vehemently opposed Home Rule, fearing the loss of their political and economic privileges. In Britain, the Conservative Party and a significant portion of the Liberal Party were also opposed to granting Ireland self-governance. Edward VII's approach to the Irish question was largely non-interventionist. He did not actively engage in the political debate or advocate for a particular position. Instead, he upheld the constitutional conventions of the time, which required the monarch to act on the advice of the government. His neutrality in this divisive issue was in line with the constitutional role of the monarchy, where the monarch refrains from taking a public stance on political matters. The early 20th century witnessed significant labor and social unrest in Britain. Workers' rights, fair wages, and improved working conditions became central issues, leading to strikes and protests. One of the most notable events of this period was the Taff Vale case of 1901, where a court ruling held a trade union liable for damages incurred during a strike, significantly impacting union activities. Edward VII faced the challenge of balancing the interests of labor, industry, and the government. While he did not intervene directly in labor disputes, his role as a mediator and diplomat occasionally came into play. His diplomatic skills were occasionally employed to diffuse tensions and encourage negotiations between labor unions and employers. Nevertheless, the king refrained from taking sides in these conflicts. The early 20th century also saw the rise of the women's suffrage movement in Britain. Women, particularly those organized under the banner of the Women's Social and Political Union, WSPU, led by Emmeline Pankhurst, demanded the right to vote on an equal basis with men. Edward VII's reign coincided with the early stages of the suffrage movement, and the issue was met with resistance from both political and social quarters. The suffragettes employed various tactics, including protests, hunger strikes, and civil disobedience, to draw attention to their cause. King Edward VII did not take a public stance on the suffrage issue. As with other political matters, he adhered to the constitutional convention that the monarch should remain politically neutral. However, the suffrage movement would gain momentum and eventually achieve success after his reign, with the Representation of the People Act 1918 granting limited voting rights to women. Edward VII's approach to handling these challenges was rooted in his understanding of the constitutional monarchy. He maintained a position of political neutrality and refrained from intervening directly in contentious political issues. Instead, he focused on fulfilling his ceremonial duties and used his diplomatic skills to foster relationships with foreign leaders, which contributed to Britain's international reputation and influence. While some critics argued that he should have played a more active role in addressing domestic issues, Edward's adherence to constitutional norms was seen as upholding the principles of constitutional monarchy. His successor, King George V, would continue this tradition, maintaining a politically impartial role in British politics. King Edward VII's reign had a lasting impact on the British monarchy, ushering in a period of change and modernization. His influence on the monarchy can be summarized as follows. Humanizing the monarchy. Edward VII brought a more approachable and sociable demeanor to the monarchy. He was known for his charm, wit, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life. This made the monarchy more relatable and less distant to the public, improving its popularity and public image. Diplomatic role. Edward VII's active engagement in international diplomacy and his success as a mediator in various conflicts earned him the nickname Peacemaker King. His diplomatic efforts enhanced Britain's standing on the world stage and highlighted the monarchy's role in foreign affairs. Embracing modernity. The Edwardian era marked a transition from the strict conservatism of the Victorian era to a more modern and progressive monarchy. King Edward VII and his wife, Queen Alexandra, were fashion trendsetters, and their lifestyle choices reflected changing societal norms. Promoting the arts. Edward VII's patronage of the arts and his involvement in cultural activities helped promote British culture. His support for the arts and literature contributed to the flourishing of creativity during his reign. The Edwardian era, as exemplified by King Edward VII's reign, is a pivotal chapter in British and world history. Its impact on the 20th century is undeniable, and its multifaceted nature offers ample opportunities for exploration and study, making it a compelling subject for historians and history enthusiasts alike. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it informative, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this in the future.